It seems like at this point in college football, the transfer portal is more popular than high school recruiting, as people get way more excited about an incoming transfer quarterback than they do a freshman coming out of high school. That's just the reality of the situation, so getting a top-end quarterback in the portal is huge for your team. In today's video, we're going to take a look at the top 15 quarterbacks in this year's transfer portal and talk about where they are going. All this stuff is pretty much finalized, so we're going to go ahead and do that. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about where the top 15 quarterbacks in this year's portal are going. Okay, so before we get started, I always use 24/7 Sports for these rankings, but they have some sort of glitch in their system where I think they accidentally left the top-ranked quarterbacks from the spring window ahead. That's why it'll be a little bit confusing, but their list of top 15 quarterbacks actually starts at number 25, so the guy in 25th is actually 15th. But before we can talk about that, let's hear a word from the sponsor of today's video. If you're constantly on the go or tired of skipping meals, Huel has you covered. They're today's sponsor, and they're spelled H-U-E-L. Their Black Edition Ready to Drink is a total game changer. It's a complete meal in one bottle with 35 grams of protein, 27 vitamins and minerals, it's high in fiber and low in sugar. So not only will you feel full, but you'll also feel focused and ready for your day. There's no prep, there's no cleanup. Huel's already sold over 500 million meals around the world, and now it is your turn to try it. Because you're a viewer of the Scott Fisher YouTube channel, new customers will get 15% off plus a free gift at Huel.com when you use my code FISHER, that is F-I-S-H-E-R. Honestly, there are tons of days where I don't really feel like making breakfast, so having a bottle to just grab and go that also gives me everything I need for the day is just extremely convenient and has honestly been awesome. It helps me to work on the go or work out in public without having to worry about making some sort of meal. Huel is a perfectly balanced meal while also saving you time. It's designed by experts to provide all the nutrients that your body needs from a meal, and Huel takes the guesswork and time out of healthy eating. No prep, no cooking. It also tastes like a milkshake, so it's not like a disgusting thing of protein powder or something like that. And it's also less than $5. It's budget friendly, and I'm genuinely excited about it. My favorite is the Black Edition Ready to Drink because it has a whopping 35 grams of protein. Start saving time and money without compromising on nutrition today with this exclusive offer for new customers for 15% off and a free gift using my code FISHER, F-I-S-H-E-R, at Huel.com, Huel.com. I want to give them a shout out for sponsoring today's video, and now let's talk about some transfer quarterbacks. At number 15, we have one of the few quarterbacks who is not projected to start from this year's portal, and that is Nolan. Originally named Prentice, he ended up going by the nickname Air, which checks out, and he decided to transfer from Ohio State over to South Carolina. Nolan ended up going to Langston Hughes High School in Fairburn, Georgia, and actually was incredible during his 3.5 years as a starter. He put up ridiculous numbers, and was found as an early gem by Ryan Day. He'd end up committing to Ohio State and absolutely blew up, and would become a Buckeye, but they decided to bring in Julian Sayin from the transfer portal, so it kind of seemed like Nolan's time was over before it began. Nolan played one season last year as a backup for the Buckeyes and is now transferred over to South Carolina. He probably saw what Shane Beamer and the South Carolina staff have done with Lenora Sellers, and I'd say they're somewhat similar players, so Nolan will likely be a backup for this year, learn the system, and then take over next season, as I truly believe Lenora Sellers will go off to the NFL. He's sort of pulling a Dante Moore or a Kyler Murray in this case, and I can't wait to see what he can do. Our other guy on the list who I do not believe will start this year is Walker White. Walker White came out of the city of Little Rock, and while he was at Little Rock Academy, he ended up having nearly 2,300 yards and 29 touchdowns his senior season, and was rated as a top 10 quarterback. He's a guy who could both run and pass the ball, and would decide to commit to Auburn. Tigers fans were super pumped about him, but after just one season, Walker did not get on the field, and obviously didn't like the direction of the program, so he decided to enter the transfer portal, where he will now head off to Baylor. Similar to Nolan, Sawyer Robertson is quarterback 1 for Baylor right now, and he could be an NFL draft pick next year, and this may be his last year of playing at Baylor, so Walker will learn the system, get prepared, and hopefully take over in 2026. Him and Nolan are in similar spots, and those are the first two transfers on the list. At number 13, we get to talk about the guy who took Walker White's spot, and that is Jackson Arnold. Coming out of Denton Guyer High School, Arnold was one of the best players in high school football, as he was the Gatorade Player of the Year following his senior season, and put up ridiculous numbers. He decided to commit to Oklahoma, and the 5-star recruit had a ton of height. Unfortunately, he was a mixed bag in 2023 in their bowl game, and then last year just straight up wasn't good. Arnold ended up passing for 1,400 yards with 12 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, but was benched in favor of true freshman Michael Hawkins Jr. and just could not really get things going. The offensive coordinator situation did not help, but now Jackson Arnold will go to Auburn and hope that Hugh Freeze can develop him into a future NFL quarterback, because that's what we all thought he was going to do coming out of high school. For now, Arnold has been a bust, but he's headed to Auburn and we'll see what happens. At number 12, we have Perbula, and he's one of the more interesting players on this list, as he's pretty much never started a game, but has so much potential that scouts are really high on him. Coming out of high school, Bo was only a 3-star recruit, and ended up going to Central York High School. He was in the same class as Drew Aller, so his back was sort of against the wall from the beginning, but during his time as a backup in Happy Valley, he was really solid. Last year, Bo had to fill in a little bit, and in total, he had about 275 yards and 5 touchdowns, and 242 yards and 4 touchdowns on the ground. He is a true dual-threat quarterback, and looking for an opportunity to start, he decided to transfer from Penn State to Mizzou. Mizzou just lost their 3-year starter in Brady Cook, and I would say these guys are somewhat similar players, as Bo is likely going to be quarterback 1 for Mizzou, and hopefully will help keep Elijah Drinkwitz and the Tigers near the top of the SEC, but he's definitely one of the more hit-or-miss players on this list, as we don't really know much about him so far. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's pretty much Jeff Brom's model for the quarterback position right now at Louisville, as in his first year, he grabbed an older quarterback in Jack Plummer, and then last year, he grabbed an older quarterback in Tyler Shuck. He did the same thing in 2025, as he decided to grab Miller Moss from USC. Coming out of Bishop Alemany High School in California, Miller Moss was a 4-star recruit and was a really good player. Sadly though, he came in as part of the same class as Jackson Dart, so Moss was always sort of behind the 8 ball. He ended up being a backup for 3 years before showing out in their Holiday Bowl game against Louisville of all teams, and then last year, Moss threw for 2,600 yards and 18 touchdowns. He had some struggles though, so he was benched in favor of Jiren Sagabetelli, and they decided to move forward with Sagabetelli, so Moss entered the portal. He'll now head to Louisville, where he'll take over as the starting quarterback, and Jeff Brom has a way with quarterbacks, so I'm pretty sure he'll be pretty good and probably make his way to the NFL, but for now, we'll just have to wait and see what happens with him. Up next, we need to talk about a guy who is truly underrated, and that is Mark Granowski. He ended up growing up in Naperville, Illinois, and would eventually go to Nikico Valley High School. He was only a 0-star recruit though, and decided to commit to South Dakota State. He's one of those hidden gems, as during his 4 years with the Jackrabbits, he put up crazy numbers. I mean, this guy had nearly 10,000 yards and 100 touchdowns, won 2 FCS titles, and just knew how to win football games. Granowski was also a dual threat, and after deciding to enter the portal, he got a couple of offers but would settle on Iowa. Honestly, I have absolutely no idea why you would choose Iowa if you're a quarterback, but I guess he thinks it'll be a good fit for him. I know he was battling some injury issues, but I know he'll have at least 1 more year at Iowa, and we'll see if he can turn the Hawkeyes around, and he's someone that not everybody knows about, but I think will be really good. There's some guys who I've talked about a million times on the channel, and Connor Weman is one of them. After going to Bridgeland High School in Texas, he ended up blowing up between his junior and senior season, as he had nearly 6,000 yards and about 60 touchdowns in his last 2 years, and blew up into a 5-star recruit. Weman decided to commit to Texas A&M, and was seen as the future of the Aggies program. Weman would play the last couple of games of the 2022 season, throwing for nearly 900 yards and 8 touchdowns. He would start out in the beginning of 2023, but would later get hurt. Going into 2024, he was getting top 10 draft pick level of hype, but unfortunately, he was a bust. He ended up getting benched in favor of Marcel Reed, and he only threw for about 800 yards with 3 touchdowns, and he had 5 interceptions. It was not a good ratio, and he decided to transfer to the Big 12 and down a little bit to Houston. Houston needs to find a new quarterback after losing Donovan Smith, so he will definitely take over for the Cougars and hope to save his career and have 2 good seasons with them. Another really interesting player who's next up on the list is Malik Murphy. I've been talking about Malik Murphy for quite some time on the channel, as he ended up going to Junipero Serra High School in California and was one of the top quarterbacks in the nation. He ended up throwing for about 3,000 yards and 22 touchdowns, but also get hurt. He decided to commit to play football at Texas and was bumped down to a 4-star and played a little bit of mop-up duty when Quinn Ewers got hurt. He decided to transfer across the country over to Duke in 2024, and under Manny Diaz, he had a really good season. Murphy ended up passing for 2,900 yards and 26 touchdowns, and my favorite moment was his walk-off touchdown in one of their final games against Wake Forest. Murphy was good, but I guess they didn't think he was good enough, as they decided to send him to the curb and pick up an $8 million quarterback in Darien Mensah from Tulane. Murphy then had to find a school, and he's eventually settled on Oregon State, who couldn't really figure out a player last year, and now he'll take over for a team that's technically not Power 5, but for all intensive purposes kind of feels like it. Malik Murphy is definitely an underrated quarterback in this year's portal, and I'm curious to see how he's going to do across the country with the Beavers. It's funny, the guy who actually replaced Murphy at Duke is ranked right ahead of him, and that is Darien Mensah. He'd ended up going to St. Joseph High School, and he was also from the state of California, and he ended up passing for 2,300 yards and 25 touchdowns, but was only ranked as a 3-star recruit. Mensah would decide to commit to Tulane, and following in the footsteps of future NFL quarterback Michael Pratt, Mensah would take over in 2024, beating out a couple of other talented options. In his one season, he completed 66% of his passes, threw for 2,700 yards, and also had 22 touchdowns. He was not seen as much of a dual threat, but Mensah, I guess, can get the job done, and was given a huge payday, as some believe he got an $8 to $9 million NIL deal to go play for Duke. I don't think he's that much of an upgrade over Malik Murphy, to be honest, but maybe Duke knows something I don't. I'm just an idiot on YouTube. At number 6, we need to talk about Luke Croman. He ended up coming out of the city of Savannah, Georgia, and went to Benedictine Military Academy. Former 4-star recruit and Auburn quarterback Holden Geriner came before him and sort of showed Luke the ropes, as once Luke took over, he passed for 2,600 yards and 27 touchdowns his junior year, and would then follow it up with a similar season in 2023. Croman was a borderline 5-star recruit, and would decide to enroll at Florida State. Seen as the eventual successor of the program, Croman played a little bit in 2024, but Florida State was an absolute dumpster fire, as we all know, and in total, he finished with 3 touchdowns and 2 picks. After the season was over, instead of sticking around, he must have gotten some sort of NIL deal to go to Mississippi State, as he transferred over to the SEC, and I'm not sure if he's going to be the starter or not. Honestly, I think he should be, but I know Blake Shapen is technically back. Whether Luke plays this year or not, he's definitely the future of Mississippi State, and has a lot of untapped potential, and is one of my favorite players in this year's portal class. At number 5, we have one of those guys who I believe is a fake transfer, and that is Jiren Sagabetelli. He ended up coming out of the infamous St. Louis High School, where the Tagovailoa brothers played, and during his senior season, he passed for 3,000 yards and 46 touchdowns, compared to only 3 picks. He was the Gatorade Player of the Year, and had over 10,000 career passing yards, and actually set Hawaii's state record over guys like Mackenzie Milton, Dylan Gabriel, and Tua. That's pretty cool. He was bumped up to a 5-star recruit at one point, but he would end up falling down to a 4. He originally decided to commit to Cal before flipping to Oregon, but after just a couple of days at Oregon, he'd enter the portal again and go back to Cal. I have no idea what happened while he was there, but it's hard for me to even count this as a transfer, but technically it is. He will battle it out with Ohio State transfer Devin Brown, as they will look to replace Fernando Mendoza, and JKS has a really bright future, but I'm not sure if he's going to start this year. I don't know if 24/7 Sports did some of this stuff on purpose, but literally the guy who they're replacing is Fernando Mendoza, and he's next up on the list. Coming out of Columbus High School in Miami, he was a late riser in his high school class, as he only threw for 1,300 yards and 16 touchdowns his final year, which is why he was only a 2-star recruit. He ended up flipping from Yale to Cal, and during his 2 seasons of playing football at Cal, he was pretty good. He combined for about 5,000 yards and 34 total touchdowns, and this past season, despite having a pretty terrible team, he's one of the more efficient quarterbacks in the ACC, and at 6'6", he's got limitless potential. Following this season, he decided to transfer over to Indiana, where he will replace Curtis Rourke, who was just drafted, and Curt Cignetti in Indiana will hope to make this guy their next big thing. I've seen some NFL mock drafts that have him as a first-round pick, and to me, it's all potential right now. At number 3, we have a guy who I personally think should be number 1 in the portal, and that is Jon Matier. Coming out of Little Elm, Texas, Matier put up ridiculous numbers while he was in high school, but no one really cared. They all thought he was overrated, and after having 7,000 yards and nearly 1,300 rushing yards, he ended up deciding to commit to Washington State after a late offer. He has a somewhat similar story to Keon Ward, it seems, and after being a backup, Matier would take over this year, throwing for 3,100 yards with 29 touchdowns, and also running for nearly 1,000 yards and 15 scores. He did this all at Washington State, and after the season was over, the whole coaching staff pretty much left, but his offensive coordinator went to Oklahoma. It also seems like Jon got a big payday from the Sooners, and head coach Brent Venables is hoping that Matier can be as good as advertised because he desperately needs a winning season, and Matier could be the next great Oklahoma quarterback. Arguably the biggest quarterback name in this year's portal is at number 2, and that is Carson Beck. Coming out of Jacksonville, he was both a star football and baseball player, and after flipping around to a couple of schools, he would eventually settle on Georgia to play football and not baseball. That came after having 3,600 yards and 30 touchdowns in his final season, and Beck would sit on the bench for a couple of years before taking over in 2023. He ended up throwing for 3,900 yards and 24 touchdowns, but Georgia would not get to the playoff. He then came back instead of going off to the NFL and put up 3,400 yards with 28 touchdowns and 12 picks. His completion percentage went down, he won less games and threw more interceptions, but he technically threw more yards and touchdowns. There were also a couple of games where he completely disappeared, and once again, instead of going off to the NFL, he entered the portal late and decided on Miami. They gave him a huge NIL deal too, which I don't think is worth it, but they're trying to keep the same production as Cam Ward, and some people think Beck is set up for failure, or many want to see him fail in general, but I am curious to see how he's going to do this year, and if he can put the finishing touches on what is a pretty solid career. And last but not least, we have Nikico Imalyava. I'm just going to call him Nico for the rest of the video, but coming out of Long Beach Poly High School in California, Nico was a 5-star recruit and one of the figureheads of the NIL era. It was estimated he got $8 to $9 million to go to Tennessee back a couple years ago, and I'm not quite sure if it happened, but he did deliver. After being on the bench for 1 year at Tennessee, he took over as the starter last year, throwing for 2,600 yards and 19 touchdowns, and also rushing for about 400 yards on the ground. He also led Tennessee to the college football playoff, and despite getting boat raced in the first round by Ohio State, it was still a solid year, and many believed he was just starting to scratch the surface on how good he could be, and that he was a top-tier NFL prospect for 2026. But all that has been put into question, as him and his brother have caused a lot of problems with NIL. Nico decided to skip practice hoping for more money, and he got shown the door. He then transferred to UCLA, who desperately needed a quarterback, and then his brother also quit on Arkansas and transferred to UCLA. The brothers are definitely interesting, but who knows? So yeah, in today's video, we talked about where the top 15 transfer quarterbacks are going for 2025, and what do you think? Who do you think is underrated? Who do you think is overrated? And who's a transfer quarterback who you think is going under the radar, who is not on the list? Also, be sure to check out today's video sponsor, Huel. And before you go, don't forget to also leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and check out all the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.